And welcome to the Actual Tech Media Expert Series. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event on firewalls, why they matter, and where they fit in the cloud era. Now, before we get to today's great session, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of it. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that come in. That Q&A panel is also the place to just say hello, which a lot of you have been doing already. We love to hear where you're logging in from. And it's also the place to let us know if we can help in the unlikely event that you have any technical issues. A browser refresh will fix most of those issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Now, these Expert Series events are special product-neutral looks at pressing technology problems presented by an expert in the field. But the support of our sponsor makes it possible for us to bring you this content, so we want to give a special shout-out. So in the next slide, I'm going to share a message from our sponsor today, and it'll refer to links that you can find in the handout section of your console at any time during the presentation. As always, the handout section also has a few valuable Actual Tech Media links as well, like the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events like this one. So now, before we get into the main presentation, a few words from our sponsor. So we are supported by Palo Alto. Palo Alto Networks is the world's cybersecurity leader. They envision a world where each day is safer than the one before. Their next-gen security solutions, expert services, and industry-leading threat intelligence empower organizations across every sector to transform with confidence. Check out the QR code on this screen for AI and Appetizers, a special event featuring Palo Alto and Strata. So once again, take advantage of that handout section where you can find this AI and Appetizers link, as well as other Actual Tech Media links. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic session. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today, Evgeniy Kharam. Evgeny's going to tell you a little bit about himself in a minute, but let me just say he has broad expertise on all aspects of IT security for reasons that he'll tell you about, but he got to start professionally working with firewalls for one of the pioneers in the industry. There's nobody better to give us the full context for where firewalls and related technologies fit into the overall security picture today. Evgeniy, welcome. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm very, very happy to present today about firewalls. For guys that don't know me, I've been in the firewall industry for at least 20 years. I actually started to work in a firewall company called Checkpoint at the beginning of my career. So I have a lot of information. I have a lot of opinions in this space as well. And we will talk today if the firewalls still matter in the cloud era when we have all the SaaS applications kind of, let me rephrase it, when we have majority of the applications in the cloud and basically as a SaaS. So let's begin and we'll dive in there. So as I mentioned, I'm Evgeny. I've been around for 20 years. I did a variety of stuff in the industry, from starting two podcasts, one called Security Architecture and the second one called Cyber Inspiration. I have my own consulting business called AK Cyber. I do quite a lot of presentations. I consult to VARs, MSSPs, and many, many big companies as well. And I also co-founded a ski and snowboard cybersecurity conference. And you can learn more about me on LinkedIn, and I hope today as well. So, is our world complex? I believe it's very, very complex. When I started in the industry, we kind of had like 5 different devices. We had firewalls, we have email security, we had antiviruses, and then we added some other things on top of it. Right now, I have categories of different vendors And the main category is going to, I believe, 120. So it means there's a lot of different vendors, there's a lot of different domains, there's a lot of different things. And firewalls are definitely part of it. So before we begin, I want to explain what kind of firewalls exist because it will help us to paint a picture why we still need them and where we use them. I'm going to go relatively quickly on these slides because we're going to come back to them later on to go a bit more in depth. So, one, and probably one of the first firewalls that we kind of work till today is called stateful firewall, is the regular firewall you have in your branches, in your office, in your data center, and pretty much every time we say firewall, it's a firewall that are stateful firewall. We'll explain a bit later what does it mean, because it can keep state. If you know TCP and UDP, you understand what does it mean, because it is very important to understand not letting the bad guys in. The other one is a segmentation firewall. In traditional networks, again, talking about 15, 20 years ago, we had like a flat network when we have a switch, a router, and basically everyone could and could go anywhere as they want, from your user network to your server network to any other networks exist, even sometimes deems that, even though it's not supposed to be. Very, very quickly, we started to segment the firewalls. You probably hear a term called zero trust, basically not segment the firewalls, segment the networks, and only allow people to go between different locations and networks. That's very, very important. We also have a zero trust or micro-segmentation firewalls where we deploy them on a network itself to be able to control who can go on the same network, because by default, when we want to have a communication and connection on the same network, it's usually allowed. Nothing can stop us there. We still have, and we're going to have in the future as well, firewalls that connected between B2B, business to business. We also have cloud firewalls. We'll talk about them later as well. It's all the different type of firewalls that are located in AWS, Azure, and GCP. Now, as I mentioned, and I promised I will go quickly because I'm going to come back. There's 5 different types of firewalls, and there's quite a lot of things happening in the world in where it is right now. So let's go a bit back and talk about the history and what's happening and why it's important. The firewall I didn't mention in the beginning, it's stateless firewall. And you can see in the subject only in the history, because in reality, none of the firewalls you use at your home, you use in your branch, you use in a data center should be stateless. What I mean by that is we allow one connection out and we need to create the same connection, understand how it's going to come back. Why I say almost? Because we'll see some use cases that are used in the cloud where we still use stateless firewall and what's the reason for this and if it's a good or bad idea. Very quickly, around 20 years ago, companies like Checkpoint, like Cisco, Juniper, created the stateful firewall. Some people claim it's Cisco, some people claim it's Checkpoint, doesn't really matter right now. But the firewalls, the traditional firewalls, the hardware, and some of the virtual firewalls are stateful firewalls. They remember the state of the connection, they remember the state of the TCP, SYN and AG, and they understand if the connection went out, it allowed to come back, depend on ports, and depend, of course, on the table. But it is a very important part to remember, especially for the newer people that are still learning about cybersecurity and the industry. I promised to go in the history and how we got where we got. When we started with firewalls, there was only a firewall, and we had a separate system called intrusion prevention system. Actually, in the beginning, it was intrusion detection system and prevention system. As you may see in the picture system, the detection system can basically just bark. So it will able to detect the bad guys. It will able to detect the bad connections, but it will not able to stop it. From the architecture perspective, in many cases, we had the IDEA system on a span port, on a tap port, mirror port to see the traffic, or we'll put it in line, but we only allow it to watch and not interact. IPS system is the one that can understand what's happening. So it has all the features of the IDS, but it can also prevent the traffic and it have to be in line. There's some architectural scenarios where it doesn't have to be, but I personally believe this is how it should be. After that, and again, going a bit in the history, remember we needed to connect from office to office, or we need to connect from home back to the environment. It was a different appliance as well. After that, it's actually in 2000s, it's a very, very interesting use case. The URL filtering, the one you know right now, the one that not allowed you to go to Facebook or to go to gambling sites, or can understand and be very dynamic what you're trying to do. It's all started in the universities because the government didn't want the kids to go to, you can guess which sites, and they wanted them to learn. Of course, it moved quite a lot from this time. And right now, all the systems that we know right now pretty much use URL filtering. Why it's important? Because when we take IPS, when we take URL filtering, when we take VPN, it's become part of next generation firewalls. Actually, if we be very precise, it started as a UTM, Unified Threat Management, in the beginning, and then NG is the one that actually started as next generation firewalls. Interesting enough, Palo Alto is the one that started the trend. Palo Alto is the first one that introduced the idea because the biggest claim was we can do all things in parallel. Now, we are not stopping here. There's several important parts of the next generation firewall that I believe very important. One, probably one of the biggest one in the beginning, is during this time, and we're talking about 15 years ago right now, 15 years ago, we basically saw that companies will block all the ports and only will allow port 80, what we know as HTTP, to go out. It means all the applications, Skype during this time was one of the coolest one to do it, were able to adapt and change all the ports they used before to go out to the internet to have a connectivity to updates to port 80. So in reality, we have only port 80 working and still all the applications that used to work before that we were thinking are blocked still working, like BitTorrent, for example. So the application-aware firewall understands not just the protocol, but also understand the applications that are running on top of this protocol. This is one. Two, we adding the idea of identity. The traditional, what we call layer 4 firewall, understand as a source is a network part or IP, maybe domain. With the navigation firewalls, we're introducing the idea of identity. The firewall is smart enough to go to Active Directory, to go to other sources, understand who is Evgeniy, and if Evgeniy is traveling from one floor to 2, 3, 4, 5 every day, because the office is multi-floors, it will able to understand where we are. You may think it's not relevant, but it's very, very relevant what I'm telling you right now, because our traditional defenses where we are right now, it's all based on this mechanism. So you want to understand why it's important and why we're doing stuff as we're doing stuff right now. So the next generation firewall can now understand who you are. It can understand groups. And if Evgeny got let go, for example, and got removed from the group, but still has connection somehow to the building, he will not able to have access. Very, very important. And there's multiple ways to do it. And the last part of next generation firewall is SSL inspection. Probably not a very big news for you that when you go to the internet and browse, majority of the websites are HTTPS. So they're no longer HTTPs or S. 10 years ago, it may be over 50%. Right now, we are closer to 95 or 98%. It means that the next generation firewall need to be able to open this traffic, to be able to inspect for URL filtering, for malware detection, for intrusion prevention, and all the good stuff that are part of the inspection engine. It's also interesting part because SSL inspection is very, very pricey. It is CPU hungry. It needs a lot of threads to run. It means the on-prem devices in many cases need to be scoped in the way that they're able to handle all this traffic. And I'm kind of slowly building you to where we are right now. So, what is happening right now, and what is the use we see right now, and where are we going as well? First of all, nobody canceled the idea of defense in depth. This is a term we've been using for many years, and I truly believe as an architect that we still need to have it. It's mean only one device, only one protection is not enough. Similar to the way you protect your house, or similar in the way, older generation people protect castles. They're going to have a fence, they're going to have some kind of water, they're going to have many different things to be able to protect them from many different attacks. So think about that because we're going to layer some of the things here. So this is a very important slide. We used to create rules. Almost doesn't matter where are the rules based on subnet IP and some kind of destination, some kind of protocol. We are now creating rules based on a user, and you can see here authenticated user. It means for authenticating you, there are certain steps I need to do. I'm going to a specific destination, not just anywhere I want, and I wanted to go to an application. This could apply for you to browse from your office, for you to browse from your home, for you to connect from your home back to the office or back to the data center. It's a very fundamental part of Zero Trust framework. And if you see here, I have application here as well. It's mean if I'm doing micro-segmentation in a data center, I don't have to have a user. My application may have a rule to go to other specific location and other specific application. We only want to allow communication to where it need to go. By this, if the bad guys, unfortunately, sometimes when the bad guys can't get in, we're going to limit the scope on the invasion. We're going to able to block them. We're able to understand they will not able to spread in our network and will able to contain them. I'm going to pause here for a second because I fundamentally believe this is very, very important when you design your architecture, when you design your rules, when you build your cloud, when you build your office. Think about that in mind. Thank you. So we're going to go back to the firewalls we spoke before, and we're going to go a bit deeper to explain where we are right now. In 2019, Gartner came out with the idea of secure access service edge. In 2022, they add the idea secure service edge. I'll explain what's the difference. Secure access service edge was a framework that consisted from 4 different pillars: network, security web gateway / firewalls, CASB, cloud access security broker, and ZTNA. The secure service edge is the components in blue. Only the security components where we take the network part apart on separately. Interestingly enough, during 2019, Gartner had a magic quadrant for firewalls and security web gateways. There was a magic quadrant for CASB. There was no magic quadrant for ZTNA. Starting from 2022, they removed all the previous magic quadrants, aka security web gateway and CASB, and now have one magic quadrant for secure service edge. This is important because basically what Gartner is saying, we want to put all these capabilities under one vendor. And this is what we see right now. We want the vendor to be able to inspect traffic. Doesn't matter where you are. If you're working from home, if you're working in the office, if you're traveling right now, if you're going to the internet, if you're connecting back to the office ZTNA, and we want you to do DLP, anti-malware, understand if you shared a file potentially to too many people. There's so many different things. And if you pay attention here, because we need to do this from different locations, it means the inspection point is now located in the cloud. It means the vendors have their own POPs, and this POPs and location located in multiple locations in the world. And the more they have them, the better for the end user, because as an end user, you want to connect to the closest POP for your traffic to be inspected. Remember, I mentioned SSL decryption. In this particular use case, I don't need to buy a very expensive box because the cloud will do it for me. And because cloud is by definition scalable, it's mean the cloud will scale depend on how much traffic I need. It's mean if my particular business doing, I don't know, e-commerce, for example, and there's a lot of traffic from my network will happening towards December because we need to have more people, it will able to scale or we hiring people during this time. When we're done the Christmas time, we can scale back and it's all happening automatically. There's a lot of buzz about SASE and SSE right now, and this is where we're going towards inspecting traffic from your office to the internet. I mentioned remote office and ZTNA. So using the same architecture, I now can protect people coming to my office. And remember the slide when we say destination is application and authenticated user, this is where it's even more applicable. I want to understand that Evgeniy is Evgeniy. I want to understand that Evgeniy coming from a device that I know is part of the domain and has the antivirus or maybe have an MDM. And I'm only allowing Evgeniy to go to specific destinations. This way, if God forbid, Evgeniy laptop got compromised, we'll able to contain where the bad guys can go. Now, ZTNA been around for quite a number of years. We have a new thing lately, and it's called universal zero trust network access. I'll let you read for a second, but I'm going to explain here as well. While I'm in the office, I'm basically can go anywhere I want inside the office, depend on my segmentation firewall, on the micro segmentation I have. But what if I apply the same idea as a ZTNA from outside the office, inside the office? It's mean I'm gonna have some kind of inspection in the cloud or some kind of logic in the cloud that will first tell me what I can or cannot do. It's gonna simplify some of the architecture, depend where is the cloud, of course, located, because it's gonna be too far. It may take too long of the time to connect. By doing that, I can now expand the ZTNA. So you've seen the bottom. Even if I'm in the office, I'm still going to the cloud to understand what I can or cannot do. And the same idea is following me. Doesn't matter where I am, if I'm home or not. It's a relatively newer approach from Gartner. And there's options and ideas how to advance, but there's definitely a lot of logic. And it definitely makes sense why this fall under SASE. And SSE has the same idea, because if I'm going to have too many different clients on my laptop, I'm always going to have some kind of routing problems. Now, don't forget, there's another part here. It's not always a client. I can also create different panels on my routers to connect my SASE and SSE provider. We only have an hour. I can probably talk for like a couple of hours about SASE and some of the different features, but let's move on and talk about some other stuff. Interesting thing happened that this year, Gartner realized, because there's so much merge happening and so much consolidation happening, they actually announced a new category, single vendor SASE. So it's mean you're still doing all your security stuff as you did before, but as part of your portfolio, you also have a hardware box. It means that the SD-WAN appliances that used to be somebody else are now part of your portfolio. And interesting enough, the bigger vendors that are in the industry, at least the main 4 or 5, they're able to develop their own, or they were able to buy somebody and integrate it as part of their stack. The benefit here is that as part of the SD-WAN box is basically software-defined WAN, we need to create different tunnels. And if I have them under one vendor, I can programmatically create this tunnel much faster. I can create failovers much faster as well. So it's working all towards testing my traffic. You may ask, how is firewall related? But it is, because firewalls is the firewall rules that control my traffic where I can or cannot go. Let's switch to data centers. So we still have the data center firewall, and this firewall is mainly there for the end user traffic. So this firewall is not for the people that are part of the company, but this firewall is there to protect and understand what user cannot do. So if I'm hosting my own web server in my data center, I need to allow who can connect and cannot connect to my data center. I need to potentially create connections to other locations. We talk about B2B, we mentioned about them as well. But data center firewalls are pretty much the same as they used to be for the last decade with some add-ons. One of the add-ons that become very important is WAF, Web Application Firewalls. In some cases, it is on the same firewall. In some cases, it's a dedicated device that acts as a web application firewall. Guess what? It pretty much works on one protocol, HTTP and HTTPS, because the majority of the traffic is web right now. But as we mentioned, under the web traffic, there's many different rails, including APIs. So WAF is quite robust because under the WAF application firewalls, I need to understand what cannot be done. If there's any bots, basically automatic script that's running, if there's any fraud, if there's any behavior of people. So it's like different domains, but it's still firewalls. We just call them WAF because they are designed to work with web applications. Let's touch base on what's happening internally and still happening internally. So we mentioned in the beginning, I have a zero trust under microsegmentation. It's basically an agent that deployed on a server can tell us who can connect to it and where is this particular server can connect as well. It doesn't have to be a third party. It could be part of your Windows firewall. It could be part of your Linux firewall, the IP tables. And there's actually several vendors that now can control these native firewalls to do it as well. And there's also dedicated companies that can do it as well. And some of these companies are also playing in a SASE world. Some of these companies are playing in a WAF world as well. So I'm looking how is it going to connect this entire stack when a vendor will be able to visualize the user journey from the internet to the WAF, where is it located, which servers are hitting, and what kind of problems they may have there. Microsegmentation is quite important on a server side in the data centers because we don't want the servers to do whatever they want. And because in many cases they are on the same network, we don't want the database from one application to talk to a database server from a different application. This way we can control and understand what can happen and prevent such scenarios. B2B. So companies need to connect one to another. It could be a bank need to connect to insurance company. It could be a police need to connect to ambulance or to somebody else because they need to exchange data. In the current world, we see a lot of API connectivity. In the past, it also was all based on basic ports and protocols, depend on the company, but we still created IPsec channels to connect between them, and we still have them. There is a bit of a change that we're starting to see. Because remember the ZTNA idea? Can I limit the scope? Because with IPsec tunnel, I need to create rules and I need to be very specific. And I'm not always able to be very, very specific here. So the universal ZTNA is a feature and several new companies are basically going across companies. They're working in a similar way as ZTNA, but they're helping one company to connect to another company. In many cases, it's like a mini agents that we deploy in people stations that allows them to connect one to another, or we deploy a mini agent on one server and another server to be able for them to connect as well. It's quite fascinating because I don't need to to do many changes on the firewalls. I don't need to open up too many rules. I can very, very detailedly understand what's happening with my connections and where the traffic is going. Let's switch to cloud. And by cloud, I mean IaaS. And by IaaS, I mean Azure, GCP, and AWS. I'm going to provide example mainly in AWS. I'm going to show you the names and what's happening with the same features somewhere else. So first of all, let's explain what kind of systems we have in the cloud. There are pretty much three different options. One is virtual machine. In AWS, it could be EC2, containers, and serverless. Each of them has different capabilities and, of course, different ways to run it. We see quite a big shift to containers and serverless in many cases because of performance and price as well. But we still see virtual machines as well. And why we need to know about them? Because there's different ways to protect them as well. So let's start from first one, security groups. Security groups are part of AWS, and they usually connected on the VPC level, or in some cases can go on the device itself as well. And they're actually stateful rules. So security group, it's a firewall in a way that understand and can help you to create rules in your environment. And this is the majority way how you allow who can or cannot connect to your resource. If you want to know what the name of this particular feature somewhere else, then in Azure, there are network security groups, and in GCP, the Google Cloud, is VPC firewalls. Another one is Knuckles, network access list. In this case, are actually stateless. Remember in the beginning, we spoke about do we use stateless rules? We still do. And it's mean if I want to create them, and we usually create them on a network level, we create them mainly to prevent certain traffic, at least the way I see it. We don't want somebody else to connect to us, so we're going to prevent this traffic from coming to us. There are some other use cases. What I will suggest is to look on Amazon best practices and frameworks and other like the Azure and GCP guides as well to understand what is the best use cases in your particular scenario. But I can show you a short summary on, by the way, this is the names in Azure and GCP as well. Very similar names in Azure and GCP, while AWS has a bit different one. So here's some of the use cases where you want to use one or another. I personally like security groups better if I can, and only going to use Knuckles if I want to prevent somebody to connect as a measure. There's also, of course, a way for you to log and understand, but I'm going to give you a second to read here and maybe do a screenshot of the slide because I believe it summarizes this in a very, very nice way with not too many words. Great. Let's move on. There's also a use case when I can use third-party firewalls, such as Palo Altos, for example. Why would I use them? One, because I have more control on the firewalls. Two, I have a centralized management between my on-prem systems and the cloud. Three, if I use AWS, GCP, and Azure as a different cloud, multi-cloud, then in every location I'll have to use different features. If I'm using one vendor, then I can control them centrally, I can get the log centrally, and I don't need to remember different lingo and different ways to create rules. So there's definitely a very, very good use case for big companies that are already using one provider. If you're a small company just starting, you're probably not going to go all the way there. But if you already use Palo Alto on-prem, for example, there's a lot of use cases. Why would you continue to using it there? As I mentioned, majority of them is ease of use, management and control, and the logging and troubleshooting become much easier where you can save your time and save majority of the time, like brain power to figure out how to change rules between different clouds. Great. I hope we're able to cover majority of the firewalls and the different use cases and where we are right now. Let's talk a bit about how to buy new firewalls and what to think about it and what to take in consideration. It's quite a big list, and you will see certain things that are bolded because I think are important. One of them is definitely alignment to ZTA, Zero Trust Architecture, management, and security features. Why I'm highlighting those? Because I think they are important, and I think any firewall you buy right now, you want to be thinking about alignment to Zero Trust. You want to have your architecture designed in the same way that will help you to be aligned to Zero Trust. And then, of course, you're going to understand how you're going to connect users, how you're going to authenticate, how you're going to manage everything. Do you need clustering and high availability? We didn't really talk about them in the cloud. Cloud is a bit separate topic, but on-prem and data centers, you still need high availability. Because majority of the traffic is HTTP/HTTPS, it's actually a lot of short and fast connections. Then the high availability also work differently. But the geo failover between data centers, it's on a different level as well. You definitely want to look on reporting. What can you understand about people? What they do? Where they browse? Can I have a better understanding if their potentially behavior starting being malicious? Or maybe it's a part of insider threat. Maybe they're downloading too much information from our system internally, and they never did it before. For the services such as SASE and SAC and firewalls on-prem as well, you definitely want to understand version release because if you own the hardware, you will need to do the maintenance yourself. If you buying it as a service, then the maintenance and the upgrades will basically be done by the provider. Segmentation is a key part. How it's going to work, how it's going to work with the rest of my environment. Responsibility and ownership is very, very fun. I just mentioned about version release. So let's say you able to have a good deal and buy firewalls on-prem or SD-WAN boxes, and you're able to do the security features in the cloud. Who responsible on what? Would you need to hire a different company to do an upgrade or to do um, patches on your firewall as well? This cost may become quite expensive later on, even so the cost of the original firewall is not so expensive in the beginning. And later on, you want to understand how you do health checks, how you're going to improve your environment as well, and if you need to go to virtualization or not. Last one here is security features. With the introduction of AI, definitely we have many firewall vendors right now introducing AI to their feature. Understand this traffic is good, understand bad domains, and basically provide you much more feedback and features much quicker as well. We're almost done, and we're going to move to questions. Before that, I want to, first of all, remind you about how you want to architect your infrastructure. Again, remember the source, the destination, and application. We want it to be authenticated user. We want to understand the application, and we only want to go to specific application. One part that people sometimes ask me is like, hey, how do I know all my applications? There's a learning mode. You can take the reporting part and understand all the applications that are currently running in your environment. So not just blindly take them, there is actually a way to do it. Last one before questions is when you starting to understand that you want to buy a new firewall or new system, and this can apply to other features as well. There's pretty much 5 pillars of the way to get it. One is business alignment. Second is to have somebody you trust, like a VAR, that will tell you what are you missing, what do you need to do, how's your use cases, can you add use cases as well. Then you continue with the market research, ideally with the VAR and trust advisor by yourself. Then you move to POC when you test everything you need. And I strongly suggest not just to stick to one vendor, always have a runner up, always have someone that if potentially the deal will not go through with the first vendor, you have somebody else. Because in many cases, the features may be good, but you're going to have issue with legal. You're not able to get the SLAs you want, not able to get the price you want. Or maybe some of the features advertised in one way, but in reality work different way. And of course, the last one is procurement. And I'll suggest to start the procurement and understanding well in advance. It takes a lot of time to sign the legal. It takes a lot of time to make sure all the paperwork is done well. So tell your vendor, explain to them your process. And if you're not familiar with the process, learn the process as well. I think that's the majority of the part. I went relatively quickly. I know we can probably talk forever for this part, but Scott, I'll be happy to answer questions and stay here as long as needed.
Okay, super. Yeah, Evgeny, that was mind expanding. My idea of what a firewall is and does has just been dramatically changed. So really, really nice overview there. Um, and we had a question here about that section about what should I consider in new firewalls. Of those, you'd highlighted a few. What's the
Back now.
most important in your view?
Well, it's a lot of question. You know what? I'll say fit to my environment because it's going to be basically one that will take under account many different things. So I need to understand my environment well to understand later on what I'm buying.
Okay. All right, great. Um, and another question here is there a term that covers these types of security controls that you've talked about today that's better than the term firewall? Something that encompasses firewalls and SSE and basically that concept of a company trying to
Hmm.
protect users and data from malicious actors on the network.
So underneath, and need just released their second version. We have basically defense and we have protect.
Yeah.
So under the protection part, if you take NIST, it will probably cover the majority of the things we spoke because we are working on our perimeter, but our perimeter defense is no longer one location. It's become pretty much everything. And under this perimeter defense, we are encompassing quite a lot of different things.
Okay. Yeah, and you had talked about, I think when you started out, you said there were like maybe, five big security controls. You're talking about, and now your personal list is up to, like 120. Um, what has sort of, the percentage of companies' security budget that goes to firewalls, like how has that changed over that time frame?
So firewall in my mind is the basic defense. So if you and me will land on a deserted island, we'll want to secure shelter, water, and fire, and before we're gonna start thinking about something else, like
Right.
how growing food. So firewalls is one of the basic security controls when every company starts. So you need to figure out how to protect it. And this could be two things. This could be to protect my information in a data center on the cloud or protect my users. We may claim protecting my information in the cloud probably going to be the first one, like the security groups in AWS, for example, because we don't want any of the bad guys to connect there. And in the same time, we're going to protect ourselves from the internal users and define ways for them to connect to this infrastructure and this information. So there's still quite an important part, and there's still going to be the higher priority to create our defense in depth.
Gotcha. Okay. In that slide that you were showing, sort of about like sort of the old way of thinking about, protecting, ports and now it's, application focused. You showed that slide two times.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, have most people made this shift, where they're doing it in the now way, or do we still have a lot of people who are relying on the before method there?
Yeah, unfortunately, we still have a lot of people that are still doing what you call layer four. So we're only using the subnets and IPs and ports and not made all the gap to where we are right now. If
Yeah.
I should guess, we're probably and 60% of the people that made the gap.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, when we even started the transition 15 years ago, will come and will during this day, I was still actually doing firewall deployment myself. We'll come to a customer, we'll do the transition, we'll do the migration, and then the customer will never finish the mapping of the applications. So it's
Gotcha.
still happening. On a better part, when we're talking about the ZTNA part, the remote access, that it started heavily during COVID, because during COVID, we all forced to work from home. When people moving to ZTNA type of applications, vendors, they are doing a better job there to actually move correctly and not just moving and have everything open.
Gotcha. So one of the questions that you posed up front there was, do we still need firewalls in the cloud era? What's your take on that?
Yeah, we still need firewalls. In some cases, the name will change. Now we'll call it security group, we'll call it SASE, SAC, we'll call it the WAF, but fundamentally still a firewall.
And if you had sort of one main takeaway for people today about firewalls, what do you want to make sure that they got out of this?
The takeaway output is understand where your business is going. Understand and try to envision where do you want the business to go. And not just use and buy the latest bells and whistles that you see people tell you to do. You need to align your security controls to your business need. As the simple example could be, let's say you have many office locations right now. Like, oh my God, I'm going to buy this fancy new SD-WAN equipment with security control and the SASE and SAC. But is your business want to keep these offices? Or maybe they want to remove them in a year or two, or vice versa. So align to where the business is going, envision different paths of where the business can go, and then understand type of firewalls you need and type of the protection you may go there to be able to spend less money and still has a very adequate and good protection for your company.
It's really sound advice. Yeah. Hey, and last thing, if if people want to hear more, from you about security, obviously you've got the Security Architecture podcast. I know you do sort of different, segments in different seasons. What are you guys up to right now?
Well, we're doing actually CNAP. We're doing cloud security, security. So how to protect your cloud, IaaS, AWS, and the GCP in general, not just as the firewalls, but what kind of access they need, what kind of applications you're uploading there, not applications, but basically because people deploying applications in the cloud, make sure they're secure as well. So this is the next transition and evolution of CSPM, CIM to CNAP. Very, very interesting. Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, Evgeny, thanks again. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and thanks for just sharing all this knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card is Hector Rivera from Puerto Rico. Congratulations to Hector Rivera. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank our sponsor, Palo Alto, for making this event possible. And thanks to everyone for attending. That concludes today's event. Have a great weekend, everybody.